Hi. I think I'm bang on 1 o'clock, and thank you for joining me today. I'm in my little shed studio down the bottom of the garden where I've been working during lockdown and conducting my lectures, meetings, markings, and it's just started to rain. So if you do hear a bit of a rain noise going on outside, then please forgive me. But thank you for joining. I've got to kind of wait about a minute, just so people, when they get the notifications that we've just gone live, they can log on. So I'm just going to fill that minute with a little bit of small talk and introduce you to the work of one of my favourite photographers of all time, a fantastic portrait photographer, American portrait photographer called Arnold Newman. And this is a portrait that he did of Igor Stravinsky. And it's one of my favourite shots. I remember as a student having to write an essay about this piece. But compositionally, it's fantastic. You know, when you think about taking a portrait of somebody, you might be going in really tight on somebody's face or full length or whatever. But he was very much a photographer who used the environment and also used things around the people that he was actually photographing that signified their skills or their creativity or what they were renowned for. So Stravinsky with the grand piano, it's just a fantastic composition using diagonal lines and leading you into the face. But just really, really simple tones. You know, if you actually look at it, you've got light, grey, black, and this big black of the grand piano lid open, and Igor very small in the bottom. So hopefully, I think that's given me a couple of minutes for people to join. So, as I say, thank you very much for coming. I'm Trudie Ballantyne. I'm the course leader of Editorial and Advertising Photography at the University of Gloucestershire. So what's this talk all about? This is really pitching to the ordinary person, not particularly to photographers. And it's really about ideas and, how it's accessible to all with photography, and how we all have, or most of us have, some kind of device that we can use, whether it be a phone or whether it be an iPad or a camera even, to actually kind of record the world around us and to tell stories. Photography is a global language. It transcends borders, it transcends languages. So with a photograph, so much can be told without the use of words. So, as I say, I'm pitching this towards anybody. So you could be a small child to a grandparent, and it's not tech heavy. I will touch upon a little bit of tech, but very, very light touch. So it's not really for the camera geeks out there. It's very much about ideas. So coming back to Arnold Newman was very famous for giving lots and lots of different quotes, and I was very happy to meet him at one point at a conference in London before he died. But one of the quotes that I was going to share with you today, he says, the camera is a mirror with a memory, but it can't think. And as a photographer or somebody who's creating images, the camera is merely a tool. It's how you use it. So the famous quote of, it's not what you got, it's how you use it, actually really does apply to photography. So we're finding ourselves now, we've been in here, I think it's 101 days now in lockdown, and you, I'm sure, like many of us, are balancing your life. You might be furloughed, you might be having to work from home and balance childcare or care for a vulnerable other. And you need this time to explore your creativity. And the accessibility of a phone camera is such a great way to give yourself a little bit of release. So what I'd like to think about is, how you perceive the world around you. How do you perceive the familiar, the mundane, the everyday, the things that we take for granted, and the things that are around you? So, we can kind of look around our spaces and we're very familiar with these things, and sometimes they go unnoticed. And so I'm going to introduce you to, a little project in a minute where it can allow you and your family and friends to explore the spaces that you're in, or the places that you go walking or do your daily exercise. But it's about paying attention. So if you really look at the light, today we've got a grey sky. I've got a lamp up here just to give me a little bit of extra light. But look at the light as it passes through the day. How does the light hit your kitchen wall at 6 o'clock in the morning? How does it hit the wall, the same place, at 6 p.m. in the evening? So really begin to notice how light moves and how light is actually reflected or absorbed or refracted through different objects, or through light, or through curtains or leaves, or wherever you are. You begin to really notice what light does. And without light, then we don't have photography. We need to have light, whether it's a big photo lights in the studio, or whether it's a bright sunny day. It might be a table lamp, it might be a candle light or fairy lights. The light that we actually use to record, we need to have some form of light. It can be very minimal, and you can adjust all your settings on your camera to allow for that. Even one of my colleagues is photographing the light from distant stars, which are millions of years old, and he's recording that onto a light sensitive emulsion. So it's really beginning to see, and light is the key. So how is it reflected? How is it diffused? How is it refracted? So you might have a glass of water, and you can see how, as I pass this through, how images change within the glass of water. So what happens if you photograph through a glass of water or a bottle of water? So think about where you go and what you do, and you use the camera like a visual notebook. So on your daily exercises, if you're going for a walk, if you're able to do that, really begin to notice where you're going and what happens, whether that's through the city streets or whether it's through a forest. Really see how the light is bounced off other buildings. So you might be walking past the Shard on a bright sunny day, and that light is reflecting off the glass and then bouncing onto other objects. So how does that, those shadows and the light and the forms that are created, what do you begin to see in those shadows and those reflected light? So you're not necessarily photographing the object itself, but you're photographing the reflections or the shadows that are created. So it might be in the countryside that you're walking. So think about how, as you're going through the forest, the light comes through the trees, it moves, it has its own kind of energy and its own organic kind of movement to the light. So really begin to enjoy seeing. Take your time. If you really do begin to slow down, don't be in a rush. Try not to think about all the things that you've got to do, all this juggling that we're doing. Put those things to one side and really begin to see the world around you and the small kind of details. So a great project that I'm going to introduce you to is looking for the alphabet. Now, on the comments below, you'll see that my Instagram feed has been, a link to my Instagram feed has been put up there. So if you want to open this in another tab, you might find this a little bit more easier to see, but because I can't share screens, I'm having to share my phone. So hopefully you can see this. So this was something, it's looking at the alphabet. And this is a great project to do with young children, with grandparents. All sorts of people can actually get involved with this. So you're looking for the alphabet, but in objects, not in letter forms. So you don't find an A on a packaging or on a sign. You actually look for an A in things around you. So this is just a bulldog clip here in the office. So that's where I was saying about finding the familiar things. B, it was my glasses on a hard sunlight day, just on a piece of white paper. So if you actually think about exploring the alphabet, I recommend that you restrict the places that you go and restrict the area that you go. Ooh, I'm getting some likes. Where you can really think about what it is that you're seeing. So on Sunday, I did this on Sunday. I did all of these 26 letters of the alphabet on Sunday. And it was a really lovely thing to do. We've all been working hard. I've been working my socks off. So I restricted myself to actually shooting around here in the shed, in my shed studio, and around just outside it, and across the garden into the garden shed. So you'll see, things like, the plug for the computer making the letter F. And if you can think about exploring, as I say, the everyday, the mundane, you look at the shadows. Look at, let me show you. It's X. This was a little table that I've got outside. So I did lean it over. It's good to find the things, but try not to manipulate it too much. But you might just want to move yourself or the object around to actually get the letter that you're looking for. You might want to look at negative spaces. So this is the letter N. So we've got the bean poles. We've got the loppers in the shed. And then hanging up in my tree outside, there's actually a very old deer antler. So we're looking at the negative space. So it might be that you look up, among tall buildings in the city, and it could be the negative space between buildings that actually make the letters. You might be looking up between trees or leaves within a forest or a park. So really begin to use your camera and see things in a different way. Think about the angle of view that you shoot. Do you look straight at an object, square on? Very often we'll look at a subject and we'll just stand at the same height, the same angle and shoot. But think about, what if you get elevated? If you can stand on a little ladder, I won't say stand on a chair because health and safety. But, if you've got a little mound or a hill or a ladder, how does the thing that you're actually photographing look when you're over the top of it? Or alternatively, how does it look if you lay on the ground? I always think it's a great idea just to take a bin bag out with you as well, so you can actually, if it's damp or wet, you can lay on the ground and shoot right down at ground level. You'll get a different perspective and a different view on things. You can play around with exposure. Most phones nowadays have override. You can put it on auto, you can just go out and shoot. But where do you take your exposure from? Do you take it from the highlights? Do you take it from the shadows? So you click on the screen at the point at which you want to expose. So you might want to underexpose or overexpose. So just explore the settings on your camera. Most of these phones now have a pro setting or a more advanced settings where you can go in and adjust the exposure. So you might want to take it right down and underexpose something to add mood to it. You might want to overexpose it. So if I show you an image I did last week, which is quite hard to see, hopefully you can see it. This was shot at 10:30 at night, just with a little solar lamp I've got in here. And again, I just underexposed it and adjusted the saturation and the color temperature a little bit. And these are things that you can do on your phone. You know, it's really easy to do. So take it off auto and start exploring things like exposure, focal length. You know, again, when we shoot, very often we just turn the phone on and take a picture. What happens if you zoom in? So if you were actually to actually go 1 times and 2 times, it will give you a longer focal length. And what happens when you shoot on a longer focal length, it tends to compress the subject and it reduces your depth of field. So it will really bring out the object that you're photographing and throw the background out of focus. So play around with the focal length. Be careful not to go too far. If you go 3 or 4 times, what you might begin to find, unless you've got a very expensive phone, a very expensive lens on it, is you start getting noise and pixelation on the image, because it's an optical zoom. It's a digital zoom, not an optical zoom. So the quality can begin to kind of reduce the more that you go in. So, you know, see if you can do it on 2 times, but don't maybe go too far forwards. You might want to play around with white balance. So again, you know, there'll be an auto setting for white balance. Have a look, can you change that white balance? Can you make it so it looks colder, it looks bluer? So you'll find that as you change the white balance setting, it might get warmer, it might get colder, it might get bluer. So that can enhance your image. You know, if you wanted an image to look cold and dark and scary, then maybe you underexpose and you change the light down to being a little bit more blue. If you want it to be kind of warm and airy, then you may overexpose and change the color temperature up to a warmer color temperature. So just have a play, you know, just start playing around with your camera. And then, of course, you've got to think about composition. You know, I talked, if you were here earlier, about the composition that Arnold Newman uses in his shots. And if you want to do a little bit more kind of research, have a look at the way that he will balance his images. And, you know, this is a classic shot. Here we've got a letter B from the lid of the grand piano. So if you happen to have a grand piano, maybe that's your B in your alphabet. But look at the mood, look at the drama, and explore your letter. You know, how is the letter represented? Is it really sharp, or are you throwing it out of focus? So there's lots and lots of different ways that you can explore the alphabet, and it's great fun to play with and have a go with. It's great with kids. And another thing, if you are kind of balancing homeschooling, if you've got primary school children who are maybe, or preschool children who are learning their alphabet, you know, this is a project that you can actually do with them as part of homeschooling. And I wouldn't necessarily say do the whole alphabet, but what's quite a fun thing is if you took the letters of their name and you start finding the objects or letters that actually spell out their name, or you can kind of start by saying, okay, A is for apple and B is for banana, and you start photographing different things which can illustrate a simple alphabet for children. And if you want to take that a little bit further, take the concept of an activity. So, you know, rather than just nouns and names of things, maybe it's, you know, B is for bedtime, or D is for dirty, or C is for cold. So how could they express that? And that can really get their creativity going as well. And, you know, maybe it's a nice thing for you to do too. And another thing is looking for faces and things. So when you see like a light switch with a switch in the middle and 2 screws on either side, suddenly you've got the eyes and the nose of a face. And, you know, cars is an obvious one, but you might find it in toys and other things. So faces are a nice little project to look at. Something else that, you know, I've really thought about and been inspired by my students, and you'll see that there's a link on the comments to the students' work that have been featured on the blog, and one in particular that I want to show you, which I should be able to show you here, is one of my second years, Gianluca Lofredo. Hopefully you can see that. This is a still life of flowers that is reflected into baking tray. So you may find that, another project you could look at is reflections. Another photographer that you might like to look at is a photographer called Lee Freelander, who did a lot of images with reflections of himself and reflections of other things. And when you look through a window, it's not just the surface, it's what's beyond it and what's behind you. So you can become part of the image as well. So when you're looking at reflections, you can look at different things like glass, mirrors, and reflective surfaces. So a bit like Blue Peter, here's something I had made earlier. This is just like a piece of card, gold on one side, silver on another, that a cake came on. And you might find them if you have smoked salmon, the same kind of thing. And these are great for playing around with reflections. So if I bring this a little bit closer to the camera, you can see how if I bend it or I twist it, how that distorts. And then if I move it around, you can see the lamp over there and outside the window. And the closer that you get, if you start going in really tight on it, you start getting the texture of the material itself. So if you want to play around with more abstract imagery, then it's quite fun to do. So these are all very accessible things. So I say bits of gold and silver reflector, you can get them from Hobbycraft as well, are quite handy. If you're playing around with shutter speeds, you might want to get a little tripod. They're very cheap. I've had this one for about 40 years. And they're lightweight. You can put them in your backpack or your pocket when you're going out, but you can get these clamps now to actually put your phone into. And that may be quite nice if you're shooting at night. You might say, well, actually, moonlight, if you've got a full moon or a good clear night, try shooting at night. What happens when you actually start exposing for moonlight, and that can be quite fun. But putting it on a tripod, because if you start slowing the shutter speed down to actually get the shot, anything under a 60th of a second, you'll find that you'll begin to get a little bit of camera movement, and that might kind of not be so good in the image that you want to create. So putting it on a tripod is quite handy. So I've got a couple of other little projects for you to think about, and one of them is about it's kind of my pet passion, which is plastics and single-use plastics. And it's something that obviously we're all aware of reducing our plastic consumption and how we actually use it and how we dispose of it and how we recycle it. So a little project that you might like to think about is looking at the amount of plastic that you might use in a day or a week, and you start collecting it. Again, this is very good to start raising awareness within yourself, with your family, about actually what do we do, what do we use, and is it essential, and can we do without it, or can we reuse it, and how do we recycle? And so these are all questions to ask. So I just wanted to show you some of my images that I did with ocean plastics. So this is a collection that I created, which again, they should be made absolutely huge. So when it goes into a gallery situation that, people start to question. But this one's about the takeaway. So all of these objects I found on beaches around the UK, mainly Wales and Cornwall. But I gathered all this plastic together and created these collections. Now, I wouldn't suggest, obviously, in these times that you actually pick up things off the ground, but look at your own consumption. But also maybe you can start photographing things that you actually see out in the environment. So if you're out for your walk, one of my ex-students has been doing that on her walks, and it's amazing. Gloves, masks, packets of all sorts of things are just being disposed of out in the countryside. Those go into the waterways, and then into the sea. So, you know, it's an awareness thing. It might be quite a nice thing to do with children. So again, straws and lids that we've just had. Bottles. And obviously the thing with ocean plastics is that they just never break down. They just get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then get ingested into the fish and into our food chain. So it's something that, you know, we all should be very responsible about. But some of these bottles are very old. So this Coke bottle is a very old design. And I looked at the composition of these very much based on like the old botanical drawings that you would have had, where you maybe have the Latin names of particular species of animals or birds or plants, etc. But it's, you know, obviously it's up to you to think about how you photograph what it is that you're collecting. Plastic is a great object to actually put light through. So when I constructed this, I actually had some light underneath it, so the plastic glows a little bit. And finally, another project that you might like to explore, I can just see you over the top here, is about words. You know, when you're looking for inspiration, you may find that there are things that inspire you, which could be music, it could be poetry, it could be lyrics, it could be a piece of narrative writing. And this is a collection that I created a few years ago based around the works of the Dimmock poets, and especially one poet, Robert Frost, who wrote a poem called The Sound of Trees. So when I was out, I was thinking about the poetry, I was thinking about their musing and their walking around Dimmock, and responding to the poetry and the writing and the narratives that they created back in 1918. So these are just a few images that I can show you here. Let's just take that down a little bit. So responding to the landscape, the trees, the old green lanes, and you may see that these were shot on actually black and white film and printed in the colour enlarger to give the particular tone and colour. But this is something that you can do actually in your phone. So there's a great little app called Snapseed. It's free. There's lots and lots of different photo adjustment apps that you can use. Let me just take that out of the way. But Snapseed is a really good one. It's free. You can change your color balance, you can change your saturation, you can change the exposure, light and dark, and you can also adjust your verticals. So it has a perspective thing. So if you're shooting up at a building and it's looking a little bit too now, you know, like it's tapering too much, and you want to straighten up those parallels, then you can, it's very, very simply on your phone. You don't need to put it into a computer or anything. You can just adjust the perspective. You can rotate it so maybe the verticals stay vertical, and you can crop it if you want to. So, you know, have a play around that. As I say, there are lots and lots of different photo adjustment apps. I won't say photo editing apps because that's a pet hate of mine. It's Americanism, and we edit photographs when we have a collection of images and we say, okay, this is my edit, these are the best ones, and now I'm going to adjust it. So, you know, we don't actually use the term photo editing for manipulating the image. So hopefully, you know, this has given you some ideas, some thoughts about the kind of ways that you can explore things around you, and so have a little look at the Instagram feed, but also have a look at the blog, our course blog. The students have just created brilliant work through lockdown, and there's quite a lot of features of students' work, both still life and portraits and fashion, that they've actually shot through FaceTime and using remote cameras. It's actually incredibly inspiring. unfortunately I can't share my screen with you, and it's a little bit kind of fiddly to show you them all on the phone, but do have a look at the link that has been put up, and have a look at the students' work that they've created, and hopefully that should give you some more inspiration. But if you do go out and do any of these projects that I've suggested, and if you do have an Instagram account, do tag me. I'd love to see the things that you create, and I can give you some feedback on it if you want, but just I'd love to see if this has actually made a difference and helped you think creatively. So let's see if there's any questions. If anyone has any questions. Yeah, absolutely, Zoe. So Zoe's saying that you don't need to have the best equipment to take photos. Totally agree. It's about really what you see. You say, what other tips other than a mini tripod do you have for using phones to taking great photos? I think it's not about the tips really. I tell you one thing that I do use, especially if you're using flash, and if you actually have any Rizzler cigarette papers, it's always worth having a packet of those in your bag, and you can lick and stick it over the flash, so it will actually act as a little diffuser. So if you're finding you're using flash, then that can diffuse the flash down, and or it'll soften that light down. So that's quite a nice little top tip. I'll be giving the A to Z project a go. Let me just show you. I'll tell you another little book that I didn't say. This book I found when I was in London, and it's very hard for you to see, but it's called The Art of Noticing by a chap called Rob Walker. And this is it's got a really great collection of different little projects that you can explore. There's nothing really complex. You don't need to have amazing kit, but this is a really cool one to do. Oh, hi, I'm going to see people I know. So let's see. Great, I'd love to see your A to Z ideas, Zoe. John, thank you. Really interesting talk. Do you think that apps like Instagram have led a wave of grassroots photography among younger people? Absolutely. Maybe they don't even realize they're doing proper photography as such. Yeah, and it's quite interesting because we can be interviewing students for a place on the course, and they may think that they've just got to show work that they've created on a previous course, so an A-level or a BTEC course, and sometimes they've been maybe misdirected, or they think they've got to show the best work that they've done for their previous qualification. And often I'll ask, have you got an Instagram? Can I see the Instagram? Because I love to see the way that people see. And I if you look at my Instagram, I use it as a visual notebook, and I've been posting every day since lockdown. The first image is Bowie with a rainbow reflection under his eye, like a tear. But it's really interesting to see how people will move around subjects, how people see subjects. So I think Instagram is a great leveler. It's accessible, and it's good fun. I love it. I really enjoy Instagram, and it's something that we really promote with our students about the professional use of Instagram and social media, how you use it as a tool to create your networks and how to promote your work, and also how you can get connected with other people that you might want to photograph or actually be involved with or collaborate with. Listra, great. Let's see your images. Mary, hi. How did you light underneath the plastic objects to make them glow? Well, that was all done in here, and I used a white Tyvek sack, which is like a postal sack, because again I found one of these on the beach, so I put that on an old piece of double glazed unit, so it's glass, but it was quite strong. And I created a little set where I had a reflector underneath, and then lights hitting the reflector, so it was bounced back up through the white Tyvek sac, which actually acts like a diffuser, and then the light coming through. So if we get back to this, if I put this in a bit closer, you can see the texture of the Tyvek sac, but that little bit of light coming through and then balancing it up with the light above, so that was a mixture of daylight and flash as well. Obviously, the more experience you get, the more complex and more control that you can have over what it is that you're doing. Tori, what do you think of live settings on phones these days? Good for taking still or moving image, moving sky or distraction? You know what, I don't have a great opinion. I think it's fun, but you know, when you actually see those on coming up on Instagram or on Facebook, I'm not a great fan personally, but I think anything that you as an individual enjoy that makes photography accessible to you, then play with it. You know, the whole thing with photography is it's fun, and even as a professional, you know, you get access to people and places that you would never have got access to. So play with it, explore it. I love moving image. Let me just see if I can find. This is something I shot last week when I was in the midst of marking. I hope you can see that, but this is a little bit of moving image. If you see, the leaves are just the light's coming through the trees, so that's where I'm saying about looking and seeing. So I was sitting here marking and I just kind of looked up and I thought, oh gosh, that looks nice. So just think about your composition, how it works, and yeah, record it, do it. Hope that answers your question, Tori. Nice to see you, darling. Amanda, re-Instagram. Would you start posting from day one to show your development, or wait until you're clearer in the practice that you begin posting? Thank you for your time, much appreciated. So Amanda, I think it depends on you as an individual. Do you want to be a photographer? Are you looking to study photography? Is it something that you want to share with a community? So in that case, if you're experimenting, what you might like to do is start an Instagram account, which maybe is you know, not your real name, or it might be a pseudonym, or it might be an anagram of your name or something, that you can just start posting images up just to kind of see the reaction. And obviously the hashtags that you put in there are also very important. So if there are particular photographers or ways of seeing, or you might put hashtags photography, or you know, there are all sorts of ways that you can actually kind of get attention. But then if you think that you want to be a photographer, or you want to come and study photography, then you would want to start more of a professional Instagram account. But even then, you know, it's not just putting up polished work, it's going to be those personal images as well. And a successful Instagram account isn't just, you know, amazing polished work, it is that visual notebook. But if you want to just try things, either just shoot on your phone and see what you get, and once you have a collection that you think, yeah, okay, I'm ready to roll, then put them up. But you might want to start another Instagram if it's something that you want to share with a particular community. Leslie, really interesting to hear your talk about students and using Instagram, hear about your previous projects using written poetry. I'm wondering how important you think captions are. Again, I think it depends what you're using Instagram for. If it's a professional tool, then yes, there will be captions. You might be collaborating with others that you have to credit. There might be a makeup artist or a stylist or an art director. But I think it's very simple captions are good. You know, you don't want to have a whole long essay, people won't read it. So just short, concise, and if you do look through my alphabet one, you'll see the first ones that I put up on Sunday, I just put the letters with no explanation, and it was a little bit of a teaser for people who might be following me and wondering what I'm up to. So I kind of built the alphabet up from Z through to A over the last 4 days, and as I built it up, I introduced a little bit more text about what it was about and this talk today. So I used it as a little bit of a promotional tool as well. But again, the image should stand alone. You know, the way that you actually have created that image and the story that you want to tell. You know, don't forget you can add, you know, more than one image on a post. So you can swipe left or right. Oh, sorry, you can swipe left to see, you know, 2 or 3 images in there, which maybe create a bit of a narrative. Some people really like to use Instagram, and some of them are incredibly clever, where they, you know, really create the grid, and you look at the grid and you see the whole image as on the grid form. Tori, thanks. That moving image is a great example. Going to Northumberland soon, and the skies and the light. Defo, my cat. Yeah, great. Share it. I'll look out for your Instagram, Tori, and hope you have a lovely time. Go to Anik. It's great. Those boulders on the beaches are just brilliant. Amanda Steer, perfect. Thank you. Instagram comments. Alternative account is a great idea. Cool. So thanks, John. Are there any other questions? If there's anybody else out there that I know, just say hi. It'd be nice to see. This is the maddest thing about this. I have no idea who's watching, and anyway, but thank you very much for coming, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and do tag me. I'd love to see some of the work that you create, and yeah, check out the students' work on the blog as well. And it's not just students' work on there. You'll see work by colleagues and news about what we get up to as well on the course, if you're particularly interested in that. Hi, Johnny. Okay, great. Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, it's lovely seeing everybody coming up here. Evelyn's a great example. Evelyn Havinga, who's just posted hi there. If you look at her Instagram, she uses the grid format really well, and how she'll lay out her. Maybe you want to post up your link there. Oh, this is great. Hi. Cool. I don't think there's any. If there's no other questions, I better get back to doing some marking. And thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully we can do it again sometime. But drop me a message if you want to know anything more about the course or whatever. But it's been lovely being here. Thanks for having me.